All right, so it's been 3 hours. Just a heads up, it does take a while for the liquid latex to fully dry. This part here is not completely dried, but I think it's going to be okay enough to start. So I'm going to use Stream and Mermaid for this layer. I'm not going to use the really light color. And then I'm going to add just a little bit of sterling alloy. Make sure that it's completely mixed up before you start. You could also use a metallic with this. I'm using the alloy because the alloys are a little bit more of a leafing metallic, and I would like to have some chunks of metallics in here. So I'd like the look of the chunks within the layers. So we're blowing it out exactly the same as the first layer. Whoops, using those 2 colors just to darken right around the edges here. Now I can't remember if I said it in the first layer or not. I am using a blower here. You could use an air compressor if you have one, or you could use like an empty squeeze bottle. The thing with the empty squeeze bottles though is it does get a little bit hard if you're inflating it quickly for it to re-inflate. So there are some limitations to it, but it's a great alternative if you just want to try a technique out and see if it's your cup of tea. There's nothing worse than spending a whole lot on supplies and then realizing that wasn't your forte. But these blower tools are not super expensive. I'm in Canada and they're about, I think about 20 bucks or something. So they're not super expensive, but they're a great way to test and see if you like it. I happen to have an air compressor that could be used as well, but I didn't want to use it for this video simply because it's not something that a lot of people have access to or can afford. So I wanted to keep the tools used easily accessible to people. So I'm just going back and forth between the lighter or the medium and the darker color, adding a little bit of that alloy and then some of the isopropyl alcohol and then blowing it out. Now it doesn't seem to be leafing as much as I would like, but what I'm going to do once I get enough of the metallic on there, or how much I would like to be on there, I'm just going to do the last little bit with just alcohol ink to help separate it a little bit. And I'm blowing it out, but I'm not blowing it out all the way to the edges. I do want to be able to see that first layer in there. A little bit of the medium color here, a little bit of metallic in here. And I do find putting a drop of the alcohol ink, then the metallic, then the alcohol ink tends to help it, the alloy flow a little bit better. There we go. And you're just going to continue this as much as you want until you're satisfied with your results. If like there's a whole bunch of metallic in here and I don't necessarily want a big lump of metallic, I'm just going to go use my alcohol ink and separate it a little bit more. And I'm noticing as I'm using that alcohol ink to separate it, I'm getting a little bit more of the chunking of the leafing. Another thing that would help the leafing would be using blending solution, and I might just go grab that for this layer because it is recommended to use the blending solution simply because there's resin within the blending solution and it works well with the alloys. It helps that leafing action occur. So I'm just gonna grab that a second and I'll be back. All right, so here is my alcohol blending solution. And I can see right away, as soon as I start putting it down, I start getting a little bit more leafing. It's funny, some of the details that you totally remember and then others that after a little bit it rings a bell again. So the blending solution works very similar to the isopropyl alcohol, but there is resin in it. Something to keep in mind. That is why it works well with the leafing. Isopropyl is great to use because it's an inexpensive way to move them around. And it's great for when you're starting, but sometimes you do need the blending solution because the alcohol inks do what they're supposed to do a little bit better when you're using them. Just gonna add a little bit of some of the darker alcohol ink. And just like I said, you get to decide when you are completely done. You can stop at any time. And I'm very close to being done. All right, a little tiny, just darken that right in there. And then add a little bit more because I just lightened it after I blew it out. All right, blowing it out tightly, or just a tiny little bit. I just don't want hard edges there. All right, I am gonna leave that layer to completely dry. Then I will remove the liquid latex and the masking fluid, and then spray it with the Kamar varnish as well as my UV spray. A couple coats of the Kamar and then a couple light coats of the UV spray. I have drips down the side there that before I spray it, I am just going to take my brush with some isopropyl alcohol, just soften those lines. I like them there, so I don't want to remove them totally. I just want to soften them a little bit so they're not quite so harsh with the other layer. And I will see you tomorrow in the next video, and we're going to add our next layer of resin. Back again super quick. I just wanted to mention that if by chance you get a touch of tape residue on, let's get a clean one, on your resin, just take a little bit of isopropyl alcohol and Q-tip and you can clean that off. And sometimes you'll find that you get a little bit of a mark from the isopropyl alcohol on the resin. Again, we're adding a couple more layers still, so we don't need to worry about that. Just want to remove what you can between the layers so that it doesn't affect your final result. We'll see you tomorrow.